Back in 1994, Nintendo had somewhat of an iron-fisted hold over the major games industry. Considering that two of their consoles were by far the most popular at least, they had a pretty big say in what would get published, how much of it would be pressed, or whether or not a game could have adult themes or not. Even having contracts saying how many games a certain developer would be allowed to release per year. That isn't to say though that some major companies like Capcom didn't have a tight-knit relationship with the Big M, but suffice it to say, Nintendo's rulebook and strict regulations were creatively limiting to some. Especially for this one company called Squaresoft, who had ambitions of darker games with big stories, big graphics, and big boobs. Big budgets and big bites also, hence when the 5th console generation rolled around, with Sony coming to peak and introducing their new CD-based system and a healthy waft of cash for those willing to produce for it, Square jumped on that D faster than you could say over-explained origin story that I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times before. That story would tell the tale of hot-blooded Detective Joe, the man with the suit and the face on a murder case in modern-day New York City. Now, of course, they decided to scratch that idea because hot-blooded Detective Joe sounds kinda fucking dumb, but many an idea was still kept around. The modern city setting, for instance, went to Parasite Eve. The supernatural ideas, like a dictator sorceress, were reused later in Final Fantasy VIII, and the more grim setting and darker tone found their home right here in Final Fantasy VII. They had already started messing around with their Silicon Graphics Onyx workstations just as well, making 3D rendered character models and experimenting with CG backgrounds by way of bitmapped snapshots. And the main theme of the game had been set in stone for quite some time too. See, our main director, Hironobu Sakaguchi, wanted to write a story about life, what that meant and how it impacted the world and those living in it. This gave way to the concept of the life stream. The idea was that everything, living or dead, had a soul, and that soul could manifest itself as a type of energy cycling through the innards of the planet, essentially allowing for life to exist. However, there would be an evil company called the Shinra who would suck up said life stream to then pawn it off as a type of electricity called Mako, effectively sucking the poor planet dry in a manner not too dissimilar from what's happening here on Earth right now with fossil fuels and the like. Anyway, being made out of souls or whatever, said Mako could also be condensed down into these magic rock-like spheres called materia, which can give people superpowers, what they can do JRPG gameplay things with by equipping them in menus. As lore would have it though, some stupid alien lady crash lands onto the planet who, upon being found by local scientists, is determined to be, and I quote, super life streamy, yeah. And so they promptly confiscate her body parts and proceed to stuff her cells into all manner of shits, like this here baby called who was once like an okay dude, but is now like not an okay dude, seeing as he tries to fuse with the planet by summoning a giant meteor to crater up the place, situating himself well snug in that their livestream leak. And yeah, that's it really. The entire main plot of Final Fantasy VII in one horribly overgeneralized nutshell. There aren't any crazy big terminology bombs, no complex poetic wafflery, it's just a very straightforward story with understandable and relatable environmental concepts and one by-the-books edgy anime villain man to top it off, which made the game like resonate with people and stuff, and so that'll also be this video's main point going forward. Thing is the way that I see it is that Final Fantasy VII is a game all about character. Final Fantasy VII means so very, very much to me. It means so much to me because the game, it means so much to me. So, how much does Final Fantasy VII mean to you? I wouldn't know. Never played it. Before I start sucking the game's dick though, there's one pretty big elephant in the room that needs addressing, which is the actual physical writing of the dialogue and the translation that came with it, because yeah, it's not exactly a beaconing display of good dialogue, as this was Square's first attempt at pulling off something of this scale, and also 90s translation and video game writing standards in general were rather low. I personally don't think that any of this is a detriment to the game at all per se, but I can see how people now in
current year
might not take too kindly to seeing dialogue like the now infamous "this guy are sick." Not to mention the interpunction minefield that is Barrett's every sentence. Even me, Mr. I know this game so well, found myself double-taking and stumbling over quite a few lines. A pretty infamous example of this is this wee bit of text during the first proper battle.
Attack while its tail is up. It's gonna counterattack with its laser.
If you look at that proper, you can see what he means. Like, if you attack while its tail is up, it will counterattack with its laser, but the way that it's written now with the long space in between the two sentences, shit doesn't flow very well. Even as much as including a simple if before the first line would have helped out a lot, because they seem like two completely separate statements now.
Attack while its tail is up.
Oh, okay.
It's gonna counterattack with its laser.
Oh no, what could I possibly have done to deserve that? Yeah, see what I mean? And there's many other bits like that where one could ponder over what was exactly said. Money, oh my. It must have been a lot of it. Sure. Well, what the hell? It's a verbal agreement. Now let me figure this out. Oh, stop it, Cloud. Did you hear me?
What? Halt! No one is allowed to pass.
You know, I got some tickets to see Loveless. Do you want to go? What are you, retarded? Midgar's under martial law now. You mean, you really are concerned for me?
Hell no!
But in case you forgot, we're in the middle of a slum. They could be anywhere around, so stay on your guard. Right, you mean the avalanche shirts? Don't you worry, Soldier has been added to the police force. And at one point, I also got an item called Loco Weed. not too sure what was up with that. But yeah. I think that despite everything though, the reason that people, including myself, still feel so very strongly about this game and its story is due to its well-built, explained, and above all characterized world and characters. Sure, the dialogue is derpy, but even someone as simple as a throwaway side character like Jessie has a lot going on in subtly telegraphed ways. She likes bombs and monitors, flashy stuff. And so, she's the one explaining the layout of Midgar to you in a passionate and lighthearted manner that tells you a lot about her personality without having to be all like, ugh, I'm the nerdy tech girl. She ain't hacking no mainframes either. She's a fucking badass with a soft side, down for a laugh. And all the game needed to be able to show that were a few expository lines of dialogue, and you getting a peek into their world through simply just being able to be there, watching them banter on about shit, like Barrett and this Mr. T-ass dialogue, which, while a bit corny, does instantly establish what he's all about. He ain't taking none of y'all pansy-ass shit. Just sit down, Cloud, and be humble. It's all kinda script writing 101-y, and I get that, trust me, but you'd be amazed how many other games fuck this shit up just by stuff being overcomplicated.
Hey everybody, does anyone want a Pepsi?
When Aerith asks Cloud if he has any materia on him, thus making him a big man, he's all like, yeah, some. Or when she asks him if Tifa is his girlfriend, he shakes his head like an embarrassed child. Wow, what an adorable boy, you guys. Bless his plump little hoof hands. Cloud McStrife has often been described as an emo character, but I don't really see it. Like, dude cracks wise, says movie one-liners, has trademark Vogue poses like a proper JoJo, and is the tough-as-a-brick support keeping the main cast together. They all depend on him and help him out in return when he's doing whatever the hell this is. Actions speak louder than words, of course, and Final Fantasy VII certainly is a game of action. And also words, like, Jesus fuck man, at times this fucking thing is like a goddamn visual novel. Luckily though, these words are also of the loud variety. Not because everyone's screaming at you, though Sid certainly fucking tries, but more so because everything everyone says is relevant to the situation, that character in question, or to the world's lore in general. This easily could have been the expository mess that I accused some other RPGs of being, but the writing just has so much spunk that it's always cheeky regardless.
Example.
After the gang blows up the first reactor, there's this random NPC who hints at there being many innocents who've lost their lives in the explosion. That's never brought up as a major plot point, but it's little comments like that that add a sense of weight to your actions, as well as just making you feel as a part of a reactionary world. I mean, there's many interesting locations in the game, like Junon, a city that can transform into one big artillery, or a giant theme park in the sky with a wretched jail at its sandy feet. But it's what all the people in these places have to say about them that makes them so interesting. All of the prisoners in the sandy shithole, for instance, are deranged, hopeless stutterers, one of whom just follows you around for no real reason. Or how about the countless people in Midgar complaining about how poor they are? Not just by saying, "Dang, I'm so poor," but through them actually detailing their crazy little side stories, like here in this one house owned by an old couple who are sad and lonely now that their son Johnny has gone missing. You can enter his room and peep at his rad-ass leather jacket and get a quick impression of who he really was. A bit later though, on a train, you catch someone anxiously staring out of the window screaming, "Goodbye! Adios, Midgar!" Which says a lot, and then hours further into the game, he reappears in Costa del Sol with his newly found cutie. Well, either that or he's just creeping on her, which also says a lot. That's a lot of fucking backstory for a character who isn't even really a character. And there's tons of other little moments like that that make me connect to this game's world quite deeply. Like this little girl whose life you save, who later becomes affectionate towards my boy Cloud, or even just the fact that Avalanche's base is hidden below a pinball machine elevator says a lot about how zany and goofy the gang really is. Not to mention the fact that every single shopkeeper has something neat to say. There's so many random rooms and weird events that didn't really have to be there. Other than that, I guess they just really wanted to tell a story about a slack-jawed nerd who runs a store together with a bunch of girls who try to abrasively lure in customers because Junon has a lot of stores and they can't compete. Which it fucking does as well, and so I like that that's a thing that the devs apparently liked as well. Entering a new city or town knowing that all the buildings you see are enterable and will likely also hold something memorable makes the game 10 times more funner and better. Oh, and there's also a cat house with cats, and this one generic NPC guy who straight up got mad when I waltzed into his house and link raided the place for potions. Truly the mark of a good game. All cities and towns on the planet have their own architecture and interior styles. Midgar is rubbish incarnate and very grimdark. Calm is a neat Germanic little town with soft moody lighting and these cutesy little street tiles and houses. Cosmo Canyon is a big mountain, and so it looks proper mountainy with plenty of mountainy mountain motifs. Junon has big, kind of London-style flat blocks, but with an industrial steampunky coating, metal-plated interiors, and of course, Big Gun. Costa del Sol is the sunny beach town, so the insides of houses are proper Atari 2600 with the wood varnish and the open windows and natural lighting providing maximum breeze. And I could probably go on like this for hours. I just fucking love shit like this, okay? Hence why I have an entire series dedicated to it, but I'm bringing it up here because I feel like high-density world detail is relevant to the characterization topic of this video, but also because it's kind of an art that I feel the JRPG has lost. I mean, Morrowind was all over the place environments-wise, boasting an immensely diverse world. All Final Fantasies were much like 7 as well, and Fallout had lots of dungeony variety with many an NPC in town to cough up the backstories. These days though, we got Final Fantasy XV, which is just a big field and 2 cities, Fallout 4, which consisted out of one big desert with some caves, all of which roughly looking the same, and Skyrim was basically just the ice level. Now, don't worry, I'm not old manning the fuck out over here. Video games have still improved the fuck ton in many other areas, but just as someone who really enjoys jizzing over cool visual level design and world building, I do really miss this style of RPG. Shit properly made you feel like you were going on a big adventure, meeting lots of strange people and going to tons of strange places along the way. More the 1,000-year door and less sticker star is pretty much what I'm getting at here. What surprises me a lot is how mature some of the writing is, despite some of its now politically incorrect scenes or themes. Barrett talks like Mr. T, sure, but it's never played up for laughs or stereotyped to the point of a fault. That's just his personality. He's a real guy who cares about the world, his adopted daughter, and tries desperately to keep his temperament in check whilst also letting it flourish when in a bind. Tifa isn't the breasts on a stick bimbo some articles would like you to believe either. She's a fucking non-sexualized badass, dude. She cares for Cloud, but not in a my hero kind of way. It's deeper than that, and the writing shows this really well in my opinion. I mean, she has weaknesses, but never relies on Cloud to save her. In fact, on multiple occasions, she saves his ass despite he made this cool big dick promise that he'd save her. And like I said, even so much as the NPCs and random ass houses detail their own little stories that are tragic yet uplifting and neat at the same time. One of my favorites of these is the tale of Sid and Shara. Shara is Sid's assistant, being that he's a space-flying, aircraft-building engineer man. However, right off the bat, you notice Sid being downright abusive to her, bossing her around, cursing all over the place, and she just seems to take it. Now, despite this being a thing that happens IRL and something that video games tend to typically steer clear from, thus making its inclusion somewhat progressive and cool just on that basis alone, it is the history behind it that makes it special inside of the game's world and outside of it. See, a few years before you game in the game, Sid finna launch a rocket on the first ever space mission commissioned by the Shinra. But during the launch program, shit turns to fuck because Shara stayed behind in the engine room to check on a faulty bit of tech. And sadly, despite the following launch failure not even entirely being her fault, she feels guilty about this regardless. And so they have this weird mutual understanding thing where she stays around indebted to Sid, yet also pissing him off at just about every second, which she takes in strides. Now, obviously, this is probably not the best way to go about this situation at all, but this is a thing that happens when adult. It's a grown-ass story, basically, about dealing with guilt, pent-up frustration, and even just relationships in general that, believe it or not, also reaches a very satisfying conclusion, allowing Shara to redeem herself, and for Sid to finally become the drooling space monkey he was always destined to be. All that from a fucking video game with typos and character models with hoof hands. Anyway, there's also that one cross-dressing scene with some mild allusions to cartoonish gay rape, or something in that fashion at least, but even here I'd say that it's oddly progressive in its own way. There's a few cross-dressing dudes in the gym for one, who are totes cool and not treated as walking memes. And Cloud having to femme himself up also inspires a local tailor to get back into it, and generally people just seem to be like, hey man, looking good. It's not a joke, necessarily. Maybe a little bit, but not one that I say that's inherently offensive. Though I can see it being complicated around trans people, maybe, given that gender dysphoria can come with a free batch of PTSD at least, thus maybe making this topic a bit more sensitive than it would have been otherwise, but I don't know, man. I'd say that, for its time especially, they pulled this off perfectly well. And also, Tifa says retarded at one point, which, yeah, probably wasn't in the original script. Just saying. In any case though, yeah, despite its age and it also showing it in a lot of ways, like the battle system being slow as fucking shit, basic running around being somewhat jerky, and many other things, it is also still a pretty okay good video game. It's just such a satisfying little story and stuff. I mean, you get to like sneak through vents, ride and jump on trains, fly airships, chill out at the beach, ride a boat, fight some kaiju, climb mountains, have high-speed chase sequences, sleep in creepy ghost houses, and get sent to prison 3 times, and so much more. If not all, then surely at least one of these things will stick with you, making you look back after playing saying, that game was alright. Which caused this badass bitch to sell like millions of copies, making it a game that like sold millions of copies. And naturally, Square wanted to follow that up, and so they went straight back to work on Final Fantasy VIII. At the time, I was only but a wee bab, so don't quote me on this, but I vaguely remember seeing it on the Bab News. They showed off some FMV reels and shit, and while I had yet to find out what the hell a Final Fantasy even was, it still got me proper.
Mom!
Oh, yes, honey, what is it?
Mom, I want this game!
Oh, but honey, we can...
Shut up, bitch, I want it now!
Okay, sweetie.
After which, I played it for about an hour, got lost and or stuck inside Balam Garden, and said, this game suck, it is bore. Which seemed to be more or less the general consensus back then as well. Well, not the getting stuck bit, but people certainly weren't sure if it lived up to the hype, and Square felt that too. Not so much in a monetary sense per se, but they felt it nonetheless. They would eventually recover, of course, by releasing straight-up bangers like Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy Tactics, and more experimental and daring adventures that did pay off, like the flawed but sexy Kingdom Hearts, and the awkward but popular Final Fantasy X, but suffice it to say, none of the games really matched the cultural gravitas that Final Fantasy VII had.
So, what better thing to do than to milk that titty for all she's worth a good 7 fucking years later? Holy shit, this video is long. Goodbye.